Hi, my name is Alexander and I'm 67 years old. At our Sunday family dinner, my daughter-in-law suddenly called me a freeloader. The room froze. My son looked away, my grandchildren stared, and I sat in silence. They thought my quietness meant guilt, but hidden in my heart was a truth so powerful it would shatter every assumption and leave everyone speechless. Before I reveal what happened when I finally spoke, let me ask you something. If your family humiliated you at the dinner table, would you stay silent or reveal the truth? Tell me in the comments below, and also share which city and country you're watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more powerful true stories. Sunday evening at Daniel's house was supposed to be warm and comforting. The aroma of roasted chicken and freshly baked bread filled the air, mixing with the faint scent of cinnamon from a pie cooling on the counter. Laughter echoed from the children's corner as my two grandchildren chased each other around the dining room. Their innocent giggles a stark contrast to the heaviness that would soon follow. The table was beautifully set. White linen cloth, polished silverware, glasses catching the glow of the chandelier. Plates of steaming food sat at the center. Mashed potatoes, green beans, and bowls of salad glistening with olive oil. It was a picture of family harmony, at least on the surface. I sat quietly at the far end of the table. My son Daniel, now in his 40s, sat across from me, his shoulders hunched from years of office work. Beside him, his wife Emily radiated confidence, sharp eyes, perfect posture, and a tone that always suggested she was in control. She had never hidden her irritation toward me, though she wore a mask of politeness whenever guests were present. At first, the dinner conversation was light. Daniel spoke about his work, Emily shared updates about her new boutique business, and the children proudly announced their achievements at school. I listened quietly, offering a gentle smile whenever their eyes met mine. No one asked me questions, but I had grown used to being invisible. The truth was, I didn't mind silence. After a lifetime of hard work, silence had become my companion, a space where I could reflect on memories of my late wife, Margaret, and the sacrifices I had made to raise Daniel. But that night, silence became a weapon in the wrong hands. Halfway through the meal, Emily placed her fork down with a sharp clink against the plate. The room stilled for a moment, and her voice sliced through the warm atmosphere like a cold wind. "You know, it's really unfair," she said casually, though her eyes glinted with something sharper. "Some of us work day and night to keep this house running, while others just sit around, enjoying the food without contributing anything." Her words hung heavy in the air. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair but didn't speak. The children glanced between the adults, confused, sensing something was wrong. I felt the sting immediately. Though she hadn't said my name, everyone knew exactly who she meant. Me. I lowered my gaze to the mashed potatoes on my plate, my hands tightening slightly around the fork. The insult wasn't new. Subtle comments had been thrown my way before, but never this direct, never in front of the entire family. Emily continued, a small smirk tugging at her lips. "I mean, it's one thing to be retired, but honestly, if someone isn't even paying bills, what do you call that?" A heavy silence spread across the table. My heart pounded, not from anger, but from the familiar ache of being misunderstood. For decades, I had given everything to this family, every ounce of my strength, every cent of my savings. And yet, here I sat, branded a freeloader. Daniel opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. His silence cut deeper than Emily's words. My own son, too afraid or too unwilling to defend me. The children had stopped eating. My granddaughter clutched her spoon tightly, her wide eyes flicking between me and her mother. My grandson fidgeted, whispering something I couldn't hear. For a brief moment, I thought about standing up and walking out, letting the insult settle. unanswered, carrying the pain quietly as I had so many times before. But deep inside, I knew this moment was different. This wasn't just about me. It was about the respect a parent deserves, no matter their age. So I stayed silent, waiting, letting Emily's words echo in the room. What she, and even Daniel, didn't know was that beneath my calm exterior, I carried truths that could shatter their assumptions and rewrite the story entirely, and soon those truths would come out. As Emily's harsh words echoed in my ears, my mind didn't remain in that dining room. It drifted far back across decades to a time when I was a younger man with broad shoulders, a steady stride, and dreams bigger than my pocket could carry. I was born in a small town where hard work was the only language people respected. My father worked at the steel mill until his hands were rough and his lungs weak, and my mother cleaned houses just to make sure food sat on our table. From them, I learned one thing that became my compass. Family always comes first. When I married Margaret, the love of my life, I made a promise to myself that no matter what storms came our way, I would build a life for her and the children we hoped to raise. That promise became my reason for waking up every morning, even when my back ached and my spirit felt heavy. Work was never easy. I spent over 40 years in construction, often leaving the house before dawn and returning long after sunset. Summers burned my skin, winters froze my bones, but I never once complained. Every callus on my hand was a badge of honor, proof that I was providing for my family. Margaret would wait up for me with a warm meal, her smile erasing the exhaustion of the day. When our son Daniel was born, my world became complete. I wanted him to have everything I never had, an education, opportunities, a chance to dream without limits. So every overtime shift I worked, every weekend job I took, was for him. Life tested me harder than I ever expected. When Margaret fell, sick, I watched the strongest woman I knew fade before my eyes. Her medical bills piled up like mountains, but I never let Daniel see the worry in my face. I worked double, sometimes triple shifts, pawning my own belongings, even selling the car I had saved for years to buy, just to keep her treatments going. The day I buried her, a part of me went into the ground with her. But I couldn't afford to collapse. I had a son to raise. Through the years, I skipped my own comforts, vacations, new clothes, even proper meals. I gave them all up so Daniel could go to college debt-free. I remember the day he received his acceptance letter. He hugged me, tears in his eyes, saying, "Dad, I'll make you proud," and I believed him. I believed every word. When Daniel married Emily, I welcomed her with open arms. I gave them the down payment for their house, emptied a lifetime of savings into their future, and moved into the small guest room in their home, not because I needed charity, but because Emily insisted it would be better for everyone. I paid my share quietly, helped with groceries, covered utility bills when they were short, even took care of the grandchildren so they could focus on their careers. But I never flaunted it. I never reminded them of the nights I went hungry so they wouldn't, or the years I traded my youth for their security. Now, sitting at that table, being branded a freeloader, the irony crushed me. They saw an old man, retired and quiet, eating food at their table. They didn't see the man who had built that very table, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. They didn't see the father who had poured his life into making sure his son would never feel the hunger or fear that once haunted me. I looked at Emily as she smirked, completely unaware of the weight of history sitting across from her. She thought I was just an old man overstaying his welcome. She didn't know that the roof above her head existed because I had paid for it. She didn't realize that the savings she used to start her boutique came from a father's blood, sweat, and hidden sacrifices. And Daniel, my own son, remained silent. That silence was sharper than any insult. But deep down, I knew the day. was coming when they would hear the truth. I had stayed silent too long. The clinking of cutlery filled the silence after Emily's cruel remark. My grandchildren shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the tension, even if they couldn't fully understand the words. Daniel stared into his plate, as if the mashed potatoes could shield him from the weight of the moment. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my fork. For 70 years, I had learned to swallow pride, to endure in silence, to let my sacrifices speak for themselves. But that night, something inside me broke. I cleared my throat gently, my voice low at first, but steady. "Emily," I said, "do you really think I'm a freeloader?" Her eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by my directness. She leaned, back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Well," she said with a shrug, "you don't work, you live under our roof, and Daniel and I take care of the bills. I just think it's unfair." Unfair. That word struck me harder than any insult. I leaned forward, placing my weathered hands on the table. "Do you know what unfair is?" I asked softly, my voice carrying through the room. "Unfair is working 12-hour days in blistering sun and freezing rain, so my son could have a life better than mine. Unfair is pawning my wedding ring to pay for medical bills when Margaret was sick. Unfair is burying the woman I loved alone, while still showing up for work the next day so Daniel wouldn't lose his future." The room fell completely silent. Daniel finally raised his head, guilt flickering across his face. Emily shifted uncomfortably, but I wasn't finished. "Do you see these hands?" I lifted them, the calluses still visible even in old age. "These hands built the foundation of this family. They built the very house you live in. That roof over your head, paid for by my sweat. The savings you used to start your boutique, Emily, that came from me. Every comfort you enjoy now was purchased with sacrifices you never saw, and pain you'll never know." Emily's lips parted as if to argue, but I pressed on. My voice grew firmer, stronger, filled with the weight of decades. "I may be old, I may be retired, but don't you dare call me a freeloader. I gave my life to this family, every ounce of my youth, every coin I earned, every dream I set aside. I am not your burden. I am the reason you have the luxury to sit here today and judge me." Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. My gaze swept across the table, from Daniel to Emily, to the wide-eyed grandchildren who were hearing their grandfather's truth for the first time. I never asked for recognition. I never asked for thanks. But tonight, when you called me useless, when you labeled me as if I were nothing, you forgot the truth. And the truth, Emily, is this. Without me, there would be no dinner, no house, no family as you know it. The weight of my words hung heavy in the room. My chest heaved with the release of years of silence. For the first time they saw me, not as a quiet old man at the end of the table, but as the man who had built their world, brick by brick. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound in the room was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, each second pounding like a drum in my ears. Emily sat stiff, her confident smirk gone, replaced by a flush that crept up her cheeks. She glanced at Daniel, perhaps hoping he would rescue her from the silence, but Daniel's eyes were fixed on me, filled with a shame he could no longer hide. My son swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he finally spoke. "Dad, I didn't realize. I should have defended you." His words trailed off, heavy with guilt. I saw in his eyes the little boy I once carried on my shoulders, the boy who had promised to make me proud. Now, as a grown man, he sat across from me, wrestling with the weight of all the truths I had kept hidden. Emily's eyes darted nervously between us. She tried to laugh, but her voice wavered. "I didn't mean it like that, She stopped when she saw the pain etched into my face. Her bravado melted, leaving behind something fragile, almost childlike. "I didn't know," she whispered, her gaze dropping to her plate. The grandchildren, bless their innocent hearts, looked at me with wide, tearful eyes. The eldest, Sarah, reached her small hand across the table and touched mine. "Grandpa, you're not useless," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You're our hero." Her words, so pure and unfiltered, struck deeper than anything else that night. My throat tightened, and for the first time in years, I let a tear roll down my cheek. Daniel pushed back his chair and stood up abruptly. He walked around the table, his steps unsteady, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've given everything for this family," he said firmly, his voice louder now, filled with conviction. "I let her call you that. I stayed silent when I should have stood by you. I failed you, Dad, but not anymore." His grip on my shoulder tightened, a silent promise that things would change. Emily, shaken by Daniel's words, finally rose from her seat as well. Her eyes brimmed with tears she could no longer hold back. "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I judged you by what I saw today, not by what you've lived through. I thought you were just here taking, but you've given more than I could ever repay. I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, fragile but real. My heart, though bruised by her words earlier, felt a small flicker of release. For years I had carried my sacrifices silently, but tonight my truth was no longer buried in the shadows. Tonight they had heard me. They had seen me. I looked at Emily, her tear-streaked face searching for forgiveness. "Emily," I said gently, my voice softening, "we all make mistakes. What matters is whether we learn from them." The tension in the room eased slightly, replaced by a quiet reverence. Even the youngest child, barely old enough to understand the words, sensed the gravity of the moment and sat still, eyes fixed on me. That dinner, which had begun with cruelty, had transformed into something else entirely. A reckoning, a revelation, a reminder that truth, no matter how long suppressed, always finds its way to the surface. The rest of that Sunday dinner didn't unfold as anyone had expected. The laughter and easy chatter never returned, but something more powerful took its place, a quiet understanding that shifted the very foundation of our family. Daniel remained by my side, his hand still on my shoulder, as if anchoring himself to me. For years, he had been caught between loyalty to his wife and gratitude to his father, too often choosing silence as the easier path. But that night, his silence broke. "Dad," he said, with a steadiness I hadn't heard from him in years, "things are going to change. From now on, you won't feel like a burden in your own family. This is your home. You've earned every bit of respect, every ounce of comfort, and I promise you, you'll have it." The words settled deep in my chest. For so long I had carried the weight of being invisible, of feeling as though my sacrifices were forgotten. Now, for the first time in decades, I felt seen. Emily, still trembling, reached for a napkin to wipe her tears. She turned toward me, her voice heavy with sincerity. "Robert," she said softly, her tone stripped of pride, "I see now that I was blind. I thought strength looked like paychecks and status. I didn't realize strength could also look like decades of hard work, quiet sacrifices, and love that never demanded applause. I can't take back what I said tonight, but I can promise you this: I'll never disrespect you again. You deserve honor, not shame." Her words, though simple, carried the weight of transformation. And though part of me still stung from the wound she'd caused, another part knew this was the moment of growth we all needed. The children, too, absorbed the lesson in silence. Sarah, still holding my hand, leaned her head against my arm. The youngest Matthew whispered in his innocent voice, "Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to work hard like you." Those small words pierced through decades of unspoken sacrifice and filled me with a pride that no insult could ever erase. Dinner continued quietly, but not out of awkwardness, out of respect. Each bite, each glance across the table felt different. Now, a barrier had been broken, and in its place stood the fragile beginnings of healing. In the days that followed, I noticed the change. Emily greeted me differently, not with strained politeness, but with genuine warmth. Daniel invited me to share stories with the children, encouraging them to learn about their grandfather's life. Slowly, the shame I had once carried in silence transformed into something else: recognition, dignity, even love. But perhaps the greatest change happened within me. That night, I realized that staying silent all those years hadn't been strength, it had been fear. Fear of being unwanted, fear of being dismissed. Yet when I finally spoke, I discovered that my truth carried more power than I had ever imagined. I was no longer just Grandpa at the table. I was Robert, the man who had built, sacrificed, and endured for the family he loved. And now, they finally understood. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the dinner over and over in my mind. The sting of Emily's words was still there, but so was the warmth of Sarah's little hand, Daniel's firm promise, and even Emily's humbled apology. For 70 years, I had carried the belief that silence was the safest path, that if I kept my sacrifices hidden, the world would somehow respect me. But I was wrong. Respect isn't built on silence, it's built on truth. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself and your family is the courage to finally speak. When I closed my eyes, I realized something important. I wasn't a freeloader. I was a provider, a father, a grandfather, and a man who had given his best. The truth was out now, and it had set me free. And to you listening to my story, I want to ask, if your child's spouse insulted you in front of the whole family, would you stay silent? Or would you defend the life you built with your own hands? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, let me know which country and city you're watching from so I can thank you personally. And if you've ever felt overlooked or disrespected, remember this: your story matters and your voice carries power. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss more true stories like mine. And share this story with someone who needs a reminder that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means waiting for the right moment to speak with strength. Because sometimes one voice at the dinner table can change everything.